honoring the man of God and his wife, and giving honor to the body and to Christ and all of these different things, to a sudden shift in the beginning of a service to spiritual warfare. How did we get here? How did I realize something very critical in that moment? They were not talking about some invisible demon. They were talking about me. I was a demon sitting in the back of the church with my family members, with a few of my family members. All right, so back with part B, episode 5, and the last Sunday. So this is the command, right? The youth pastor, who will remain nameless for now, in the microphone presiding, getting the service warmed up. Like I told you before, the spiritual energy is just really high, very apostolic Pentecostal style. And, his voice filled the sanctuary, just very, commanding and, praise word type energy. Pastor sitting in his seat in the pulpit. Pastor's wife is sitting in her seat in the pulpit next to him, looking regal, looking like, a restoration has happened, right? He started praising the pastor of the house. You know how we do, giving honor to the Spirit of Christ and all the other things, the leadership and everybody, the pastor, the man of God, and his wife, and all of these different things. So he said, let's honor the man of God. The congregation responded, as they typically do, with clapping, standing, and cheering. At this time, they're clapping and cheering at a whole other level because, like I said, the First Lady, she's back. We are a family again. It's just like a child in the middle of a divorce or unwanted divorce kind of thing. They see restoration where the two parents are just reconciling. That's what the energy and the mentality of the church seemed to be like then. Clapping hands, standing, cheering, people shouting, speaking in tongues, going wild because he's prolonging this part of the service where we're just honoring him and his wife. And I'm like, okay, it's not just like the normal formalities where you kind of get it done and move on to the next segment of the church service, right? He is prolonged in this space for an unusual amount of time, almost as if he's anticipating something. And I'll continue. But I'm in the back of the church right now. I'm just kind of absorbing and just kind of staying, I don't want to get overly involved in the church semantics where I jump up and sit down and tap my neighbor, punch my neighbor, and all these different things. I just want to just be fed and also just kind of come to, I don't know, just get direction. Like I said before, I didn't feel like I had direction. So I was really there just trying to, until I got direction. Didn't want to move prematurely, didn't want to leave, and all of these different things, because if this restoration is happening for his wife and him and for the church, well, for sure, I'm going to be restored in some way. I just need to be patient and see what leadership had in mind for what restoration would look like for me. Little did I know at that time. Stayed seated. I stayed quiet. I stayed in the back. I really wanted to be hidden. I did not want to be seen in any way that I usually would be. I wanted to be hidden. The service could continue without me. I don't need to be centered in the way that I used to. At least that's what I thought. So while this is going on, things quickly escalated, and I'll tell you how. Youth pastor from the Brooklyn Mother Church he kept pushing. I didn't know why. Everyone stand up and acknowledge the man of God. Every single individual, every person. This is unusual. Like if you have a huge congregation and the majority of the population and the congregation, they do the standing or they participate, you're kind of okay with that. You're not looking for that one person who is standing or sitting, in my case, in opposition to single them out, right? You're not doing that. That's not what you're here for. You're here to deliver the word of God and celebrate the pastor, right? No, everyone stand up and acknowledge the man of God. The congregation stood again, clapping, but I still remained seated. The tone changed. The energy changed. It seemed like there was a premeditated agenda that was being enacted in real time. He said into the microphone, if your neighbor is sitting down, I give you permission. I give you permission. He was giving them authoritative permission through God to tap them and tell them to stand up and honor the man of God. So suddenly I have strangers who were touching me. It started out in a very, I need to obey the man of God kind of, be obedient kind of way, but they're touching me, and this woman from the Brooklyn church, she was sitting beside me and she began nudging me, stand up. She said, and I calmly just replied to her. I said, I'm okay, thank you. I'm okay, thank you, I appreciate it. And so she kept pushing because the youth pastor, he kept pushing. And he was pointing people out to directly, authoritatively enforce these commands. And now the atmosphere was completely shifted. So this is where spiritual language becomes a weapon. I saw the weapons just kind of formulate in real time. At some point, the language changed, right? He began talking about spiritual warfare at this point. Now, suddenly, we're in spiritual warfare. We went from honoring the man of God and his wife and giving honor to the body and to Christ and all of these different things to a sudden shift in the beginning of a service to spiritual warfare. How did we get here? How did we get here? We started talking about the presence of the enemy. The presence of the enemy is suddenly just plopped down. After we've done all this praising and shouting, praise and worship has done their thing. The pastor is seated next to his wife. So this is a glorious moment. And all of a sudden the enemy has arrived. The enemy decided to come up. And so it became about demonic resistance in the room. And again, in Pentecostal culture, once that language appears, everything changes. Everybody is on their guard. People are looking for who the culprit is, looking at their neighbors because they get paranoid because they know it's not me, it's not them, right? But it's got to be somebody. So people are suspicious of each other in an unnecessary way. So it became about the presence of the enemy, the demonic resistance in the room. And so now the congregation believes that they're not dealing with a person. So anybody that is in that place that might be influenced by this demonic force is no longer a person. They no longer humanize you. They no longer see anything that you may be doing could be anything other than demonic. It is only demonic. Not you being human, not you having dealt with something outside of this, not you dealing with something that they don't even understand or even can contextualize. They don't care because it's already been determined that there's a demon in the room and that demon needs to be dealt with. So they're dealing with the spiritual force, right? People start praying harder, speaking in tongues, binding demons, driving out the enemy. And suddenly I realized something. I realized something very critical in that moment. They were not talking about some invisible demon. They were talking about me. I was a demon sitting in the back of the church with my family members, with a few of my family members. Usually the young people would try to sit back there, the teenagers who didn't, they were kind of insecure about themselves. They would sit back there. Let me sit back here, just kind of chill out. They were talking about me. So while all this is kind of brewing up, things are, the energetic momentum is just like, and I really want you to feel this. We went from 1 to 1.55, and now we're about at a 7 right now. Things are kind of escalating pretty quickly. I looked toward the front while this was happening. I saw something that I'll never forget. I saw my pastor lower his head. He stopped looking in my direction because he would always notice what I would do in the service. Then he got up and he walked out the sanctuary. He left through a side door that was close to the pulpit and disappeared into his office because he, in my mind, in my heart, he knew where this was going. He knew what was happening. He wanted to get out of there because he did not want to be privy to what was about to happen next. However, his wife, she stayed there while this was happening, while her godchildren's father was doing all of these things, the youth pastor.